That was the moment, you know, the moment my heart didn't just break. It completely shattered and turned to dust, a cold, gritty mess in my chest. I was standing in the middle of a brightly lit kitchen, a plate of perfectly baked holiday cookies cooling on the counter, and my son, my only child, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, looked me dead in the eye, utterly unconcerned, and said, "Dad, you're sweet, but you really didn't have to fly all the way out here. We actually weren't expecting you for Christmas this year." I had just landed from a cross-country flight, the one I took every single year without fail, the one that cost me nearly a month's salary, and he wasn't expecting me. His wife, my daughter-in-law Sarah, just stood there, biting her lip, refusing to meet my gaze. I flew across 3 states, brought gifts I'd spent months saving for and wrapping, and was treated like an uninvited solicitor. The sheer casualness of the statement was what killed me. Not "we forgot to call you," or "something came up," but a flat, "we weren't expecting you." I remember the blood draining from my face. I felt dizzy, like the floor had tilted. The silence in that kitchen was deafening, except for the ridiculous holiday music playing softly in the background. Now you tell me, was I wrong for what I did next? Because in that moment, standing in the home I helped them buy, the immediate, overwhelming thought that consumed me was, "You weren't expecting me. Fine, then you won't be expecting this. My name is Robert. I'm 63 years old, and until that day, I genuinely thought I had a good relationship with my son, Michael. Michael is 35, a smart, successful engineer, and a generally good man, or so I believed. He's married to Sarah, and they have 2 absolutely gorgeous kids, my grandkids, 7-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Ethan. They live about 2,000 miles away from me, on the other side of the country. I live a quiet, modest life. I've been a machinist since I was 18. It's hard, honest work. I never made a fortune, but I always made enough, and every single penny I ever saved, every extra shift I ever pulled, was ultimately for Michael. His mother, my late wife, passed away when Michael was only 10. That was a darkness that never truly left me, but I knew I had to be strong for him. I became both parents, and I poured every ounce of my being into raising him right. I missed out on a lot of things. I never remarried. I bought the cheapest car and drove it until the wheels fell off, sometimes literally. I packed my lunch every day for 40 years. All of it, every single sacrifice, was to ensure he had a better start than I did. I put him through college, a great, expensive private university. I worked 2 jobs for 4 years straight, but he graduated debt-free. That was my proudest achievement, seeing him walk across that stage. I felt like I had finally done right by my wife. Years went by. Michael met Sarah, a lovely woman, and they decided to move away for her career opportunity. It broke my heart, but I understood. I encouraged him to go and chase his dreams. They settled down, had kids, and that's when the next chapter of my sacrifice began. The housing market where they moved was insane, completely out of their reach. Michael called me one day, sounding defeated, talking about how they might have to wait years, or settle for a tiny apartment. He was so disappointed, and I couldn't bear it. I thought back to every promise I'd made to his mother about taking care of him. I decided to make the biggest financial move of my life. I had a significant chunk of money in my retirement account, which was modest but stable. It was everything I had put away over 4 decades. I pulled out nearly all of it, a sum just shy of $150,000. I told Michael and Sarah I wanted to help them get a house. They were ecstatic, practically in tears. I gifted them the entire down payment, enough for them to secure a comfortable, three-bedroom house in a good school district. It wiped out my savings, absolutely, but seeing their relief, seeing the pictures of the kids running around in their own backyard, that was my reward. I assured them I was fine, my pension would be enough, and it was, barely. The only stipulation I had, which was more of an unspoken agreement, was that I would always be welcome, that I would always be their family, their father, their grandfather. I never asked for a key, I never just showed up, but every year, without fail, I would call a month in advance to arrange my Christmas visit. It was sacred. It was my only major trip all year. It was my 1 week of feeling like a real, central part of their lives again. This year, I called Michael on November 2nd. "Hey, son, just checking on dates for Christmas," I said, my voice filled with anticipation. He sounded a little rushed, but normal. "Yeah, Dad, awesome. Just let me know when your flight lands and I'll pick you up." See? Normal, nothing felt off. I booked the flight for December 23rd, landing early afternoon. I called him back the next day with the details. "Great, Dad, got it. See you then." The next few weeks were a blur of excitement. I spent hours shopping for Lily and Ethan, trying to find the perfect educational but fun toys. I bought Michael a nice new watch, a classic piece he'd been eyeing, and for Sarah, an expensive cashmere scarf. I even baked a dozen of my famous molasses spice cookies to bring with me, perfectly packed in a tin. On December 23rd, I went through the usual miserable routine of security lines and cramped seats, but my mind was already on the look on Lily's face when she saw me, and the warmth of a hug from my son. I landed, grabbed my bags and called Michael. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I shrugged it off. Maybe he was in traffic. I took a cab. The fare was outrageous, but I didn't care. I was nearly there. I remember stepping out of the cab onto the paved driveway. It was a beautiful, crisp winter day. The house looked perfect, lights twinkling around the windows, a giant wreath on the door. It was the picture of a perfect, welcoming family Christmas. I pressed the doorbell, and Michael answered almost instantly. He was wearing a ridiculously festive Christmas sweater. He looked surprised, not happily surprised, but genuinely caught off guard. That's when it happened. I said, "Surprise, I'm here." And he just stood there for a beat too long, and then that line, that devastating heart-sinking sentence, "Dad, you're sweet, but you really didn't have to fly all the way out here. We actually weren't expecting you for Christmas this year." I stood there, holding a carry-on bag and the tin of cookies, feeling like a complete fool, an unwanted prop in their holiday tableau. I walked past him, setting my bags down near the front hall closet, and Sarah emerged from the kitchen, looking pale. "Robert, hi," she mumbled, not meeting my eyes. What's going on?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding hollow and detached, like it belonged to someone else. Michael finally coughed and said, "Look, Dad, I know we said you could come, but Sarah's parents decided last minute to fly in from Europe, and they'll be here for the whole week. It's a huge deal. They haven't been here in years. We figured you wouldn't mind if we caught up after the holidays. I was going to call you tonight." He was going to call me tonight. Tonight. After I'd already landed and was standing in his house. He hadn't just forgotten. He had consciously decided not to tell me, to let me take the trip, because telling me would have been awkward for him. His wife's parents, the ones who had never financially helped them in any significant way, were a huge deal. And I, the man who mortgaged his future for their present, was a minor inconvenience to be shunted aside with a belated phone call. I walked into the kitchen, the warmth of the room a stark contrast to the ice forming in my gut. I looked at the counter, and I saw 3 stockings hung with care. Not 4, 3. Michael, Sarah, and the 2 kids shared one, labeled the kids. My stocking, the one that had been there every year, was gone. They hadn't just not expected me, they had unexpected me. They had physically removed my presence from their preparations. They had intentionally excluded me from their Christmas. I looked at Michael, who was now nervously smoothing down his sweater. I looked at Sarah, who was fussing with a pot on the stove, avoiding my gaze like I was a ghost. I thought about the $150,000 down payment, the years of double shifts, the lonely holidays after my wife died. I thought about the watch for Michael and the cookies in my hand, and then I made my decision. A very quiet, very firm decision. "Michael," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "is everything all right with the house? Are the payments manageable?" He seemed momentarily relieved that I wasn't yelling. "Yeah, Dad, everything's great. Best thing we ever did, honestly." "Good," I said, nodding slowly. I put the cookie tin down on the counter. "I'll need to make a few calls. I think I'll take a hotel room for the week. I'll come by on the 27th to drop off the gifts and say goodbye to the kids before my flight on the 28th. He looked visibly relieved. That's really understanding of you, Dad. I really appreciate it." I just looked at him, gave him a small, empty smile, and walked out the door, picking up my bags. I didn't say goodbye to Sarah. I didn't get a hug from my son. I just left the home I had paid for. I checked into the nearest hotel, a sterile, overpriced place. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the television silently playing a holiday movie. I wasn't sad anymore. I was cold. I was calculating. I took out my phone. This is the part that defines the entire story, the action that I've been wrestling with ever since. I have a long-standing, very formal agreement with Michael, one that we signed when I gave him the money. Because it was such a large sum, and for tax purposes and future clarity, we made it a documented, interest-free, private family loan, payable on demand in case of certain, extreme circumstances. We both knew it was just a formality to protect us both, and that I would never, ever call it in. But they had treated me like refuse. They had shown me exactly how much I was worth to them, and that value was less than the comfort of avoiding an awkward phone call. I pulled up the legal document on my email. I reread the clause that gave me the right to formally demand immediate repayment of the full principal amount, $148,000, with a 30-day window. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. I explained the situation to him in clipped, professional tones, leaving out the personal drama. I simply said I needed to formally trigger the demand clause for a family loan. He sounded surprised, but professional. He promised to draw up the formal notice that afternoon. So that's the situation I was in. I was sitting in a soulless hotel room, 2,000 miles from my actual home, having been functionally disinvited from the house I helped buy, all because my son and daughter-in-law prioritize their European in-laws over the man who had given them their foundation. I had gone from being a beloved father to an inconvenient visitor in the span of a single conversation, and their conscious, calculating exclusion of me from their holiday preparations was the final, brutal cut, and I had a piece of paper, a legal document, that gave me the power to take it all away. Before I tell you what happened next, and what I did with that legal power, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let it go, taken the high road, and just accepted the slight? Or would you have played the hand you were dealt? Tell me, what would the on-demand clause mean to you in that moment of ultimate betrayal? I let the formal notice be drafted. I told my lawyer to prepare it, but not to send it just yet. I wanted to see them on the 27th first. I wanted to see if there was a glimmer of remorse, a moment of genuine apology that could pull me back from the brink. The days passed in a miserable, lonely blur. I ate room service and watched the snow fall. On the 27th, I went back to the house. I had dropped the formal notice off with a local courier, set for delivery on the 28th. It was my insurance policy, my final weapon. When I arrived, Sarah's parents were still there, a very stiff, formally polite couple. They shook my hand like I was a business associate. Lily and Ethan were thrilled to see me, which was the only genuine joy I felt all week. I spent a precious hour playing with them. I gave them their gifts, and they were over the moon. Michael pulled me aside after. "Dad, I really am sorry about how the arrival went," he muttered, avoiding eye contact again. "It was just so hectic with them here." Hectic. That was the word he used to describe his gross disrespect and calculated exclusion. No genuine apology, no mention of the removed stocking. Just a casual acknowledgement of how the arrival went. It was clear there was no remorse, just a desire to smooth things over quickly and get me out of the picture before their other, more important guests noticed the tension. I knew then I had to go through with it. The slight wasn't a mistake. It was a reflection of their true priorities. The foundation of their life was built on my sacrifice, and yet I was disposable. I looked at Michael and I said, "Michael, I need to know something. On November 2nd, you told me I would be picked up. When exactly did you decide that wasn't going to happen?" He sighed, frustrated that I was pressing the issue. "Dad, come on. Look, when Sarah's parents called on the 10th and said they were coming, we just decided to leave it, okay? We figured it would be easier than calling you back to cancel your expensive ticket. Easier for them the final, irrefutable proof of their selfishness. I understand," I said, my voice calm, almost emotionless. "Well, I have to go. My flight is tomorrow morning. Have a happy new year." I didn't say goodbye to Sarah or her parents. I just walked out for the second and final time. The next morning, back in my tiny apartment, I made the last and most critical call. I called my lawyer and gave him the green light to serve the notice. The 30-day clock started ticking. I then made another call, the one I had been dreading. I called Michael. He answered, cheerful. "Hey, Dad, landed safe." "Yes, Michael. Listen, I need to talk to you about the house." His cheer faded instantly. I told him what I had done. "I have served a formal notice calling in the full principal of the loan. You have 30 days to repay the full $148,000. Silence. Absolute, complete silence on the other end. Then a choked laugh. "Dad, are you serious? This is a joke, right? The down payment. You can't be serious." "I am completely serious, Michael," I said, my voice breaking only slightly. "The loan is on demand, and I am demanding it. I've enclosed a letter explaining why. You weren't expecting me for Christmas, Michael. You removed my stocking. You consciously allowed me to travel 2,000 miles to your doorstep knowing you were going to discard me for your in-laws. I helped you buy the house that you made very clear I was not welcome in. The money was for your security and happiness, but if I'm not part of that family, then I have no obligation to secure your life. The mortgage payment will be due in a few weeks. You can't make it without that down payment. You will have to sell the house." The explosion that followed was nuclear. Michael went from shocked to furious, screaming about how I was ruining his family, how I was being vindictive, and how I was not the man he thought I was. Sarah called me later, crying hysterically, accusing me of destroying their children's lives, of being a cruel old man who was jealous of her parents. I listened to it all, calmly and coldly. I simply repeated the same line to both of them. You weren't expecting me. Now you won't be expecting this. Over the next 4 weeks, they scrambled. They tried to get a new loan, but without my down payment being converted to equity, they couldn't get the necessary leverage. They couldn't raise that much money in 30 days. They tried to threaten me with a counter-suit, claiming emotional duress, but my lawyer laughed them out of the conversation. The agreement was watertight. The end result was inevitable. They had to sell the house to repay me and avoid foreclosure. They sold it quickly, at a loss due to the rushed nature of the sale, and they were forced to move into a rental apartment. Michael's job wasn't affected, and the kids were fine, but their dream home, the one I paid for, was gone. I received the check from the title company a week later, the full amount. I deposited it back into my retirement account. I didn't feel triumph, only a deep, profound emptiness. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. It was about being valued. I haven't spoken to Michael or Sarah in 8 months. I get pictures of my grandkids through a neutral intermediary, one of Michael's cousins. I miss them terribly. I have the money back, but I lost my son. Was it worth it? Maybe not. But sometimes, when the emotional pain is so deep, the only thing that can match the violation is a reaction of equal, devastating force. My action taught them that you cannot treat the source of your security with such callous disrespect. The moral of this story is simple. Never take a loved one's generosity for granted, and never forget that a foundation can be withdrawn as quickly as it was given. I had the power to prevent their financial ruin, but they had the power to prevent their family ruin, and they chose the latter. I hope one day they understand that. Like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe for more stories like this where I unpack the toughest decisions I've ever had to make, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in comments section. Did I go too far, or did I do what any betrayed parent would do? I'll see you all in the next story.